Well, hello and welcome to another episode of More Perfect Marketing. It's David Baer here, and today I am going to be chatting with Nicole Porter, who's joining me from Massachusetts, where she owns a business called Monomoy Social Media. But she hasn't always been a social media guru and service provider to businesses. She actually has a former life as now, this was the one thing I didn't ask how you prefer to pronounce it, chocolatier, which
Yeah.
makes me think of Disney or Hershey's or chocolatier. So, Nicole, which one is it?
And I say chocolatier. That's how that's how I do it. Where
All right.
Yep.
Well then Nicole, who is a former professional chocolatier and probably still practices the craft at home on a regular basis. Welcome.
Thank you so much for having me. I'm so excited to be here.
Indeed. So, all right, we're going to talk a little bit about social media in a moment, but I want to sort of understand how you made this shift because it's something that you share on your website and sort of publicly around your story, from being a business owner to the point where you're now helping business owners, and you have been for a number of years at this point.
Yeah, so it's kind of an interesting story. I had a small brick and mortar chocolate and ice cream shop. And at that point when I opened it, I had my oldest son who's actually turning 15 today. So it gives you an idea of how long ago this was. And then when I had my second son, it was kind of hard to have a brick and mortar shop. And through the brick and mortar shop, I was marketing through email and Facebook and Instagram, which were relatively new at that point for marketers. So when I had my second son, I moved my chocolate making to my home kitchen. And I would hand dip everything in my kitchen. And I was really relying even more heavily on Facebook and Instagram and email marketing and um, actually Reddit at the time.
Mhm.
I did a lot of marketing through Reddit. And then I had my third son, and I thought this is just too labor intensive. And through I had a background in marketing, and through my years in the chocolate industry, I had really gotten to know a lot of other entrepreneurs and small businesses in the area, and just really wanted to put my degree to use, put my knowledge of what these folks needed it to use. So I thought, this is really a good time to make that switch, go back to my marketing roots and go full into social media. People had started asking me about it. They'd started saying things like, oh, I always see you on Facebook, and I see you on Instagram, and then get your emails. And I was in a BNI at the time, and
Mhm.
there was a mortgage broker there, and she asked me to come and teach her Facebook. And that was actually kind of what solidified it for me. Went down there, I wrote her a plan, and when I left, she paid me. And I thought, okay, this is really a better use of my skills at this point in my life. And so that's how the switch happened.
Yeah, I love how sometimes we discover that there's, opportunity that we hadn't really been on the path for. And you're not the first marketer I've encountered who was doing something to support your own business and then realized, oh, there's opportunity to help other business owners out there. And so that's great that you were able to recognize that and then make the transition. So you are now working with what types of businesses?
I work with a variety, I would say, but a lot of people that are personal brands. So, speakers, authors, coaches, people that are the face of their business. I also work with a lot of nonprofits, which is a passion of mine. I really love helping nonprofits. And so, between those two, that fills up my calendar pretty well.
So quite a difference between like a retail business, or is it not, in terms of like what happens through social channels for those types of businesses?
I would say that the strategy is different, but the core principles are the same. And that's really just connecting with people and providing quality content and conversing with people. And I think if you kind of have that at the base of everything you're doing, and then you can kind of tweak it and take the, more in-depth strategy from there. So, what I would do for a personal trainer or a brick and mortar location versus an author or speaker, the base will be the same, and then we kind of tweak it. if that
So
makes
I want to
sense.
dig into that tweaking, and
Sure.
but you know, you have sort of a business that is maybe serving a local population,
Hmm.
and a business that is operating online maybe, but the types of things that they're selling or the sales cycle might be different. How did those things come into play when you're figuring out the entire social plan?
So the social plan, the strategy is the very first thing we look at before we do anything. And so the first thing I always do with my clients is we have a real in-depth conversation about what their business plan overall is. So who are they reaching? What are they selling? What do they want to get out of social media? And that really informs everything else that we do. So, if I have a local business here on Cape Cod, and they're selling shoes, I'm going to really focus on, they, let's say they have an older audience,
Mhm.
because where I live, it tends to be a lot of people retired down here or second homeowners. So that's the audience we're looking at. So where am I going to show up? What type of content am I going to be putting out? So chances are I'm going to be looking at places like Facebook, because that has an older audience. I'm going to be looking at places like YouTube, maybe, if they're able to produce video. If they're not, then, it also, we think about the capabilities of the business themselves.
Mhm.
Um, and, or do we have community focused Facebook groups, places like that? Now, maybe I have another one that's an online shoe store, and they're targeting a much younger audience. So, maybe we want to be showing up on Instagram and TikTok, because that's where the people they need to reach are hanging out. So that's really where we're starting.
Mhm.
And then from there, we're optimizing their pages. We're making sure that, okay, what are people seeing when they go there? What's the first thing that we want them to know about? What can we tell them that's going to help them? Because we really want to make sure we're adding value. And so that's really, that's our base point.
Okay.
And then from there, we're going to do outreach. And who we're reaching out to also depends on our market. So, if it's a local shoe store, I'm going to be reaching out and commenting on other local businesses. if i'm if I have an online shoe store, maybe I'm going to be commenting on people that have clothing but not shoes, so that we can take advantage of their audience and really build off of each other. So we're really tweaking from there.
So speak about the outreach activity a little bit more, because this is an area that I'm familiar with in terms of me as a person doing the commenting and engagement, let's say in a professional space like LinkedIn. But you're talking about a business interacting in some capacity with a very targeted, in this case you use the example of another business to get in front of that business's audience. How does that work?
So this is one of the core things that I do for all of my clients. And it's a really important part of showing up on these platforms. And I feel like a lot of people miss this, because these are platforms are meant to be social. And they're called social media. It's not marketing media. So we need to show up in the way that these platforms intend us to show up. They want people to have conversation. And so as a business, what I like to do is I'll take a look at that business, and we can even use my own business as an example. Who would be a good referral partner for me in the real world? Like if I'm having a networking conversation, and I'm talking to you, and you're like, well, Nicole, who can I introduce you to? I might say web developers, graphic designers, people that do SEO and Google ads. Okay, so now let's take that and let's move it onto the social arena.
Mhm.
And I can look, okay, now these same people have Facebook and LinkedIn and Twitter and Instagram. So let's talk to these people on their chosen platform, because not all people are on every platform.
Mhm.
And what I like to do is I'll actually keep a spreadsheet, because generally I want to go deep and not wide, and I want to build a relationship with somebody. So if I'm commenting each week on a web developer's post, I want to make sure that I'm doing that pretty regularly so that I'm staying top of mind with them and I'm staying top of mind with their audience. I'm also giving them a little algorithm boost because a comment is going to help their post. A comment is going to help my post because when the algorithms know that my account is active, it's going to show my content to more people. So there are a lot of benefits to making sure that you're strategically interacting with people on your chosen platforms. Does that answer your question?
I think so. And there's one thing that you said there that makes me curious about who you are choosing to
Mm-hmm.
interact with, a potential referral partner or somebody who can influence your getting exposure in front of an audience you want to get in front of. Is it important to understand how large a reach they currently have and whether you're piggybacking on something that is already a big reach, or do you not want to be competing? Or I mean, how does that all enter into it?
Yeah, I wouldn't go out and comment. I wouldn't comment on a competitor's post. So I'm not going to go out and comment on another social media agency's post if, if I feel that that's going to be encroaching on their area. I
I
don't, I
guess
think,
what I meant by competing was, again, I'm likening this to LinkedIn, where I've learned a little bit about this, and I
Mhm.
and I just don't play in this space well enough to know the answer. But let's say that you're looking to get in front of the web developer, and
Yes.
there are some web developers who have very little interaction, and there's some
Okay.
web developers who have a bit of interaction on a consistent basis, and then there are some web developers who have a crazy amount of interaction and attention. And so when
Hmm.
I said
Okay.
competition, I guess it's, are you one of 400 people commenting? Is that a good or a bad thing?
I gotcha. I think the more people, the better, because you can create conversation within that space. Now, that being said, I wouldn't necessarily shy away from commenting on somebody that's a little bit smaller, especially if it's somebody that you want to build a relationship with. If maybe you met them at a networking event and you want to stay in touch with them, that is a great way to do it. But you can also, if you have somebody and they already have 30 comments, that doesn't mean that you can't go and add your own thoughts to that post and maybe reply to some of those comments as well, because there's opportunity within the comments, not just, for your own comment to stand out, but if you start talking to other people that have already given their thoughts and say, yeah, I agree with this because da 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 da, you don't want to just go over there and say, hey, nice post,
Yeah.
because you really want to add some value and not look like a bot, because there's enough of those out there. So there's an opportunity when there's more comments, because there's more opportunity for conversation, and there's also more opportunity for larger reach, or
Yeah.
further reach, I guess I should say.
Okay, you've now uh put a question in my head about who has the time to do all of this stuff. And before we hit record, we were talking briefly about time management. And
Hmm.
obviously, this can be an overwhelming amount of activity to stay on top of and be consistent with and organize. And you talked about the spreadsheet, for example. Uh, how does a business or a business owner deal with all of this?
So I think this particular strategy can be done in 15 minutes a day. Personally, I have a goal to do 3 comments a day on LinkedIn. And I say to people all the time, there's actually 2 things. One is do what's manageable for you. So if you can only manage 15 minutes on Tuesday and Thursday, that's better than not doing it at all. And the other thing is to put it into your schedule, because if you actually set aside that 15 minutes, you're going to be much more likely to do it than if you say, okay, it's on my to-do list today. I'll get to it when, after I get all my other stuff done. Then you're probably not going to do it. It's going to fall by the wayside.
Yeah.
But it can be really effective. So between those 2 things, do what's manageable for you and put it in your schedule. It can be much more attainable and less overwhelming that way. And I think that's where a lot of business owners kind of get stuck. They think, oh my gosh, I have to spend an hour a day talking to people on social media, and you don't have to do that. It can be, just a little bit, baby steps, and kind of reach up to more and more if you feel like you can do that, or you see results on a certain platform, then put more time there.
I'm going to guess that to a certain extent, it also depends on what the goals are that you've established with your client right at the beginning. What are you trying to have social media do for your business, or some version of that question is what you mentioned earlier. And so, is that going to sort of influence or dictate, how much activity is necessary, or which kind of activity is necessary?
Yeah, that was actually more my train of thought there was, if you have a certain goal for your business, then you want to probably comment on people that, or I guess posts that are somewhat related to that goal. So, maybe you want to get more email subscribers, and their post, you see a few posts from, people talking about the benefits of email, then, you want to make sure you chime in on that. And maybe a different post isn't going to strike you quite the same way. So yes, you probably want to, if you're limited in time, the I think the content is probably more important, or the most important thing.
In terms of what you are posting up there. Okay.
Yeah. Yeah.
Got it. All right. You talked a few minutes ago about, all right, this audience is on these platforms, and this audience is on those platforms, and you've been doing this long enough that you've seen platforms come and go. You've seen a shift in where audiences and different ages spend their time. And I imagine that that's something that at least in my experience, when I used to work with businesses, they would often come to me and say, my nephew told me, or so and so told me, I need to be doing this because it's the hot new platform. And obviously there's an obvious answer to the two of us about how you address that question, but there's a constant shift. I'll give you an example that some of our listeners might be familiar with. Over the pandemic, we had a big uptick in audio-based platforms, and for a hot
Mm.
minute, there was a lot of attention around something called Clubhouse, which we don't hear as much about, although it's established plenty of communities, etc. You mentioned Reddit earlier, which is super hot in certain areas. Something that is an OG platform, Twitter, has found new audiences embracing that. How do you manage to juggle all of these things and figure out what's right, what's too early, what's not going to last? Where do you invest the time and energy and attention?
I actually just did a whole presentation on this about 2 weeks ago. And it goes back to who are we trying to reach? Where are they spending time? And I'm also a big fan of focus. So I always recommend people focus on one or two platforms and really go deep and not wide, and get their strategies consistent on those platforms before branching out to other ones. And so that's really, you really have to look at, where's your audience spending time, not only with their demographics as far as age and gender, but also what type of content are they consuming? Are they reading blogs? Are they, so are they going to be on Reddit? Do they like video? So it's a lot of that. Also the content itself. So the topic of the content. If you're looking at, celebrities, maybe you need to be on Instagram and or Twitter. But if you're looking at more business focused, then Clubhouse might be a place to show up, or obviously LinkedIn is the big one. So you have to look at a variety of factors when choosing your platform. Demographic area can also, geographic area can also play a big role in that, because certain geographic areas will use certain platforms much more than others. I mentioned I live on Cape Cod, and people do not really use Twitter down here very much at all. They just don't get it. But if I go even a couple hours north to Boston, it's much, much more popular. So it that can also have an effect on what you're choosing. So it's a lot of research into who are using these platforms and who is my ideal person that I want to talk to.
So you bring up geography, and again, before we hit record, I asked you about the name Monomoy, and you had an interesting story to share, and I wonder if share that story, please, about your shift in focus. But I'm also curious if you also shifted what platforms you were using in order to change that focus.
I did actually. Yes. So originally, when I started my business 5 years ago, I thought I was going to be just a local business. Originally when I started my business, I was wanted something as a side hustle to be with my kids more. And it didn't grow into an agency for about 2 years, but it I chose Monomoy because it's my local area. There's a local wildlife refuge. And I thought, okay, well, people know me in the area. So that's where I'll get my clients. And then my very first client, I actually met in a Facebook group, and she was in Canada. And my second client was in Texas. And I very quickly realized that I had a nationwide audience that I could talk to. And so I actually went from very heavily using Facebook and speaking in Facebook, local community Facebook groups, to really heavily concentrating on LinkedIn.
Mhm.
And that has actually been my number one place to concentrate even to this day. It gives me the highest return in investment. When I talk to people, I'll often hear when I comment for a while on different people's posts, I'll get on a Zoom with somebody and they'll say, I see you everywhere. And that's because I'm talking to people on the platforms. And
Mhm.
I mean, I'm not everywhere. I'm home with my kids and my dogs and my ducks. But they think that I'm everywhere because I'm talking to people. Um, so it definitely really makes a difference to focus on where your ideal audience is hanging out and talking to them in the right places. Like I could, and also what you can do. I could probably do quite well on Clubhouse if I chose to, but I have very limited time. I do a lot of networking. I have 3 kids at home still, so that's not the best platform for me right now. If I can pre-record videos, things like that. That works much better for my lifestyle right now. So it's also a little bit of thinking about, again, what's manageable for you.
Yeah, I think that is probably one of the things that many businesses tend to overlook, and I hear this so often. The TikTok is really hot right now in 2022, and they're now even about to attempt to compete in the retail world with Amazon and Etsy and all of those things too, and try to enter into that space. The A number of businesses who I have heard ask about, somebody said I should do TikTok, and I'm thinking, gosh, I know you. I know what by the way, I've never downloaded this app. I don't intend to download the app, but I have seen, the reposts of videos from it. And I'm thinking, gosh, what people do, or what is typically talked about on that platform, just doesn't seem to fit you and your business, or the type of time commitment that is necessary to build something organically on that platform. And so I'm assuming often a misalignment with the expectations of a business owner and the reality of what a platform actually requires to build a presence.
Yes, 100%. It's definitely like a younger audience on TikTok. That's definitely one of the things that I think people don't often think about because it's the hot new thing. But I definitely see a huge misalignment in what the business actually is and what TikTok actually is, and what they feel comfortable doing on the different platforms. Like they might feel comfortable with something like this, but they might not feel comfortable with something that might get views on TikTok. Um, I have one client that does really well on TikTok, but he speaks to children about standing up to bullies and being bully proof. And that's a great fit. But the shoe store down the road for older people is probably not.
Mhm.
People have that fear of missing out. They really do. They worry if they don't hop on the bandwagon that they're going to miss out. But it's really just a case of focusing your efforts, for the best return on investment.
And I think that's something we constantly hear when we talk about focusing in marketing in general. I mean, whether it's niching down to a particular audience or a particular service or product focus in your business, that it's often counterintuitive that you're going to be more successful when you focus more narrowly. And your point about the one or two platforms to put all your energy into the right one or two platforms seems counterintuitive when, probably a decade ago, I remember the great podcaster Pat Flynn talking about his be everywhere strategy, and that was a hot thing at that point. And obviously a lot of people, still think that that's the way to go, just the way they think that, California Chardonnay that's nice and oaky and buttery is the best wine in the world. Okay, no comment on that.
Yeah, I will comment on the wine, not my area of expertise, but I agree, and I think that a lot of people still have that mentality that the more places, the better. And if you have the capability or you have an assistant that can get you out on all these platforms, great, that's great, more power to you. But chances are most entrepreneurs don't have that capacity, and they're going to be spinning their wheels trying to be all in all of these places. And I often find that they don't do it when that happens. Either that or they put way too much time and effort and say it just doesn't work for me, nothing's happening. And but 9 times out of 10 they'll think, okay, I have to be everywhere, and then they end up being nowhere because they get so overwhelmed by it. And so I'd rather see them just do one platform really well where their people are hanging out. And they're going to get a lot more out of that. They're going to see the return on investment, much, much more than if they try to be everywhere.
What is the this is a tough question to ask, because I was going to ask a general question, and then I knew that your answer would be, well, it depends. So I was going to ask you about sort of how long do you need to invest in something to test it and see if it's working before you move on to something else. And I guess maybe the best way to answer that is to sort of talk about one or two different scenarios of getting in and testing an approach to use of a platform or a particular tactic on a platform.
Mhm. Um, I will give you a general answer and an example. So I would say that you really need a good 6 months of trying something out before seeing if it's really going to work for you. I would expect to see some movement within 3 months, but not the full potential of whatever that platform might do for you. And actually, even for my own business, when I started really focusing on staying in touch and commenting on other people's posts on LinkedIn, it took me 6 months before I started to hear those comments of "I see you everywhere," and people starting to tag me in other posts, and people starting to reach out, and all the things I was hoping to get from that strategy didn't start happening for 6 months. And I had to continue to be consistent with it even after that. So I think it does take quite a bit. Some people even say a year. I've heard that from people, especially on Instagram. I've heard a year for to try out a
Mhm.
specific strategy. So it's definitely not the magic bullet I think a lot of people think it is, because social media is so new, and it's free to put your content out there. People think they're going to do it for a little bit, and it's this magic thing that they're going to go viral, and people are going to flock to their site. And when it doesn't happen in a month, they're like, well, this just doesn't work. And that's generally not the case. It's just that you haven't given it enough time, or enough consistency, or both.
That's really helpful to hear, particularly because I hear, businesses talk about pretty much everything you can do in marketing just doesn't work because they haven't really approached it with the right time investment in seeing or clear goals in place. So not necessarily knowing what they want to get out of it, but just sort of,
Yeah.
dabbling for a while, and maybe they've given it 6 months, but they didn't get something out of it because they weren't measuring something specific potentially.
Yeah, absolutely. I think having goals and having realistic goals to start is huge. 'Cause how can you know if it's working if you don't know what you're trying to do?
Totally. So, you help businesses in two different capacities on the social media front. You run a membership for those who maybe just need to get going, and then you also provide services for other businesses. Do you want to talk a little bit about those two different areas of your business?
Sure. Thanks so much. I really appreciate that. Yeah, so we do full service execution of social media. And I always say we offer four main things with that, and that is strategy, consistency, visibility, and connection. And it's a lot of the stuff we just talked about. We start with our strategy, make sure they're consistent with their captions and graphics, and we take it over for them so that they don't have to think about it anymore. We stay up with all the algorithm changes and the tips and tweaks and rules that the are constantly changing, and stay up with the audiences and everything that are shifting from platform to platform. And then we do the outreach that I was talking about as well. So we actually will go out for our clients and talk to other people so that they don't have to worry about fitting that into their schedule. And so that's the full service offering.
Mhm.
And then we also, our membership program, we give people content. So they get Canva graphics and captions that they can use. And it's literally post this graphic with this caption on October 1st, post this caption with this graphic on October 2nd. And they
Mhm.
get posts for every day of the month, every month. And then we do an hour and a half of coaching with that as well, where they can come and pick my brain and just ask questions and get one-to-one or one-to-group feedback on whatever their question might be. And we have a Facebook group where they can ask questions as well.
Cool.
So those
And
are our
so
two
you
things.
said it's in Canva. So does that make them customizable to the business? Can they add their colors or their logo or change up something? Is that
Yes,
yeah.
absolutely. And
Cool.
we encourage that. I would say about half of the posts are copy paste where you can say it's fall and we're happy it's fall. And then
Yeah.
the other half are tell us three things about your business. Show us a behind the scenes photo today, things like
Mhm.
that. So we try to encourage authenticity and customization as much as possible because that's really what people want to see. They want, you know, people like to see behind the curtain.
Yeah, totally. And we only scratch the surface of the fact that social media is really social, and perhaps that's a conversation we'll have to continue on another episode. But if folks are interested in learning a bit more about the two different sides of your business, where can they head?
I'm very active on LinkedIn as Nicole Porter. And I also have my website, monomoysocialmedia.com, Monomoy. Monomoy. Very
I was
phonetic.
gonna say there's only one vowel in it, but I guess Y is sometimes considered a vowel. But yeah,
Yeah.
monomoysocialmedia.com. I'm looking at it right now. There you are on the homepage, pointing to all of the different things that you can do for to support businesses. And then you also mentioned Instagram, but or excuse me, LinkedIn. But I've also seen you on Instagram, and we'll make sure to leave links for all three of those in the show notes as well.
Awesome.
Nicole Porter, thank you so very much for the conversation. I really appreciate it. Some really cool insights.
Thank you so much for having me. This was a lot of fun. And, if you ever want to continue that conversation about socialness, I'm more than happy to do that.
We'll find time on the calendar. Folks, this has been another episode of More Perfect Marketing. If you know somebody who can benefit from listening to the conversation you've just heard, please share this episode. And in the meantime, this is David Baer, and I look forward to seeing you back on another episode real soon. Take care.